We live in interesting times. For the headlines. Sri Lanka's Catholic Church has cancelled plans to resume Sunday services following a specific threat of fresh bomb attacks against at least 2 places of worship. And following a shocking series of recent attacks of temples, churches, and mosques in various parts of the world, a 3-day summit was held to establish international guidelines for combating hate speech and to protect religious minorities. Nearly 800,000 people in eastern India are evacuated from the predicted path of a major cyclone packing winds of up to 200 kilometers per hour and torrential rains expected to cause major flooding. And May Day clashes between opposition supporters and Venezuela's armed forces in Caracas leave a woman dead and 46 people injured, with opposition leader Juan Guaido attempting to rally demonstrators against President Nicolas Maduro. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us. And now to the news. Sri Lanka's Catholic Church has cancelled plans to resume Sunday services following a specific threat of fresh bomb attacks against at least 2 places of worship, according to a spokesman. The church had planned to resume Sunday public services for the first time since their Easter Sunday attacks that killed 257 people. Armed guards have been stationed outside churches across the country since their Easter attacks. Police say they have arrested more than 150 suspects since the attacks and have accounted for all 6 jihadi suspects who were declared as most wanted. 2 suspects have been killed while the other 4 were in custody, according to police. President Theresa announced on Friday that the authorities believed there were 140 Islamic State-inspired jihadists in Sri Lanka, and he had ordered security forces to track them down. The Easter attacks were blamed on the local nationalist or National Tawhid Jamaat, whose leader was among the suicide bombers. The group had pledged an oath of allegiance to the Islamic State. Gunmen killed 4 worshippers and a pastor in the first jihadist attack on a church in Burkina Faso. Security and local sources said in the latest violence to rock the formerly peaceful West African nation. Sunday's raid took place in the small northern town of Silgaji near Jibu, the capital of Soum province. It was the first attack on a church since jihadist violence erupted in Burkina Faso in 2015. Former colonial ruler France has deployed some 4,500 troops in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad in a mission codenamed Barkane to help local forces try to flush out jihadist groups. Burkina Faso has suffered from increasingly frequent and deadly attacks attributed to a number of jihadist groups, including the Ansarul Islam group, the Group to Support Islam and Muslims, or GSIM, and Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. Meanwhile, following a shocking series of recent attacks of temples, churches, and mosques in various parts of the world, a 3-day summit to establish international guidelines for combating hate speech and to protect religious minorities, as well as refugees and migrants, concluded at the United Nations in Geneva. The meeting, billed as the second global summit on religion, peace, and security, has been described as a collective global response to the increasing divisions between nations and people in a time when ultra-nationalist parties are challenging multilateralism and democracy. Take a look.
We are speaking about peace, we are speaking about justice, speaking about strong institutions. When we see the climate around the world today, Just a couple of days ago, we witnessed the horrific attack of a synagogue in the United States. Just before that, we had a church burned in Burkina Faso. We had also mosque attack in New Zealand. We had Sri Lanka. So what's wrong in this world? It's easy to accuse the extreme right-wing leaders, but what are the others doing? They need to be more speaking out. They should be better mobilized. But sometimes you see also the political opportunism, even in those camps. So this is a matter which needs to be addressed. And particularly, as I said today, in Europe, the signs of the Dutertes are resurfacing. And we need to bring to an end the cynical politicians' discourse. I mean, no migrants, no refugees is responsible of what is happening, of their failing their economy or whatever. The big massacres start always with small action and language. No one would forget that the Holocaust was preceded by hate speech, hate crimes. When the Jews were being dehumanized, named after animals' names. We witnessed the same in Rwanda, when the Tutsis were dehumanized, named after animals' names, Tankrala, snake. So that was the beginning of the genocide. It started with those words. And what we are seeing today is pretty close.
The recommendations of the summit will be released next week and will aim to enhance the protection of religious minorities, refugees, and migrants with strategies to counter hate speech and to foster inclusivity. In other news, May Day clashes between opposition supporters and Venezuela's armed forces in Caracas left a woman dead and 46 people injured, with opposition leader Juan Guaido attempting to rally demonstrators against President Nicolas Maduro. Jurubit Rauseo, 27, died at a clinic after being hit by a bullet in the head during the demonstration. The non-governmental Venezuelan Observatory of Social Conflict said on Twitter, condemning her murder. A second day of confrontations between opposition supporters and Maduro security services came as the United States said it was prepared to take military action if necessary to stem the crisis in the South American nation. At least one journalist was also injured when National Guard soldiers fired rubber bullets at a group of reporters covering the clashes. Guaido rallied his supporters in Caracas in the Labor Day demonstrations, urging them to stay in the streets. His appeal came despite the apparent failure the day before of a revolt by some soldiers and members of the Bolivarian National Guard who joined his side.
Porque también sabemos y debemos reconocerlo que ayer no fueron suficientes. Debemos insistir en que toda la Fuerza Armada se manifieste conjuntamente.
Y a esta hora siguen huyendo. Y todos los cuerpos de seguridad estamos tras la captura, tras la búsqueda de estos golpistas que quedaron aislados, solos y derrotados.
Meanwhile, the U.S. and Russia accused each other of making the crisis worse, evoking Cold War confrontations of the past. In a phone call with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Moscow of destabilizing Venezuela. With the United States pushing to topple President Maduro, Pompeo charged that Russia and Cuba were instrumental in keeping Maduro in power. Lavrov in turn charged that U.S. interference was destructive and in flagrant violation of international law. Lavrov took aim at President Trump's assertions made again Wednesday by Pompeo that the United States is prepared to use force if necessary. Lavrov said, and I quote, "The pursuit of these aggressive steps is fraught with consequences," adding that only the Venezuelan people have the right to decide their destiny. The United States is among more than 50 countries, including most Latin American and European powers, that recognize Juan Guaido as interim president. Meanwhile, Russia and China provide crucial diplomatic support to Maduro, with Moscow also offering military technical assistance and Beijing providing vital credit as it buys Venezuela's oil. Welcome back, and we're still following developments out of Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro tells soldiers that the time to fight has come to give history and the world an example. Now, this was during a speech in front of soldiers at the base of Fuerte Tiuna in Caracas. Let's listen in.
Y así los llamo, soldados de la patria. Ha llegado la hora de combatir. Ha llegado la hora de dar un ejemplo a la historia y al mundo. Y decir, en Venezuela hay una Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana consecuente, leal, cohesionada, unida como nunca antes. Derrotando intentonas golpistas de traidores que se venden a los dólares de Washington.
As you can see here, President Maduro marched through the streets of Caracas in a, quote, march to reaffirm the absolute loyalty of the Venezuelan army, as opposition leader Juan Guaido continues making calls to oust his government. Clashes in the capital and other parts of the country ensued between civilians and soldiers supportive of Guaido and Maduro's security forces and pro-government militias known as colectivos. On Tuesday night, in his first public appearance since Guaido announced the final phase of his bid to take power, Maduro said his government had defeated the small uprising, which he denounced as a coup attempt organized by fascists and U.S. lackeys. In other news, as part of an agreement made to demilitarize the joint security area and transform the DMZ into a peace zone, South Korean government reopened tours to the southern part of the Panmunjom for South Koreans. Take a look. Public tours to the southern side of the inter-Korean border village resumed on Wednesday morning, with firearms and guard posts now removed from the designated Joint Security Area, or JSA, after having been stopped in October to facilitate joint efforts by Seoul and Pyongyang to demilitarize the border. The resumption of the tours is timed to mark the first anniversary of the Panmunjom Summit, the first inter-Korean talks between the South's Moon Jae-in and his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un, held at the Truce Village last year. Now, that summit fueled a whirlwind of diplomacy, which has died down amid deadlock over Pyongyang's denuclearization. While exchanges between Seoul and Pyongyang have significantly cooled after the collapse of Kim Jong-un's second summit with Trump in Hanoi, the U.S.-led United Nations Command, or UNSC, insisted tension has been significantly reduced in the JSA, or Joint Security Area.
Sure, I think that what you'll feel here in Panmunjom is a different vibe. What once was a vibe of tension is now a vibe of peace. We've taken away the landmines. We've ensured that the site has been demined. We've taken the weapons out of the towers. Our guards no longer carry weapons. And I think that what you'll see here is a place that can foster trust building and confidence that hopefully can spread across the Korean Peninsula. We're very excited for the people of South Korea and from visitors from around the world to your great country to come here and see what has changed.
Around 80 South Korean students and tourists visited the village as tours resumed.
오기 전에는 굉장히 긴장된 그런 느낌이었는데 와서 보니까 오히려 더 좀 더 평안한 느낌? 평화라는 말이 좀 더 와닿는 것 같습니다.
Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has offered to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un unconditionally in a bid to restore diplomatic ties between the two historic foes. Abe, seen as a foreign policy hawk, has recently softened his rhetoric towards Pyongyang, calling for a summit with Kim to resolve an emotional row over past kidnappings of Japanese nationals by Pyongyang agents. In an interview with the Sankei Shimbun on Wednesday, Abe said, quote, "It is more than important for our country to be proactive in tackling the issue. We can't break the shell of mutual distrust between Japan and North Korea unless I directly face Mr. Kim," he said. Now, Tokyo has been one of the most hawkish of the major powers on reclusive state North Korea and has been on the receiving end of some of Pyongyang's harshest rhetoric, as well as missiles launched over its territory. Also, Tokyo believes North Korean agents kidnapped Japanese nationals to train its spies in language and customs in the 70s and 80s. After years of denial, North Korea admitted in 2002 that it had taken 13 Japanese civilians and released what it said were the 5 survivors, saying 8 others had died. Campaigners, however, believe the disappearance of up to 470 Japanese may be linked to North Korea. North Korean authorities have given no public indication of any willingness to meet Prime Minister Abe. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange was sentenced to 50 weeks in jail for breaching a British court order 7 years ago when he took refuge in Ecuador's London embassy to avoid extradition to Sweden. Assange was sentenced to the 50 weeks in jail for breaching a British court order 7 years ago when he took refuge in Ecuador's London embassy to avoid extradition to Sweden. WikiLeaks editor-in-chief Christine Raffnson called the sentence an outrage.
It is my view as editor of WikiLeaks that this sentencing here today is an outrage and is vindictive in nature, and it doesn't give us a lot of faith in the UK justice system for the fight ahead. To get a sentence only 2 weeks short of the maximum sentence is an outrage. It's almost double the sentencing guideline. And may I point out, just in comparison, that the so-called speedboat killer got 6 months for not showing up in court to hear his sentencing for manslaughter.
Assange fled to Ecuador's embassy in 2012 after a British judge ordered his extradition to face Swedish allegations of sexual assault and rape, which he strongly denied. He claimed the allegations were a pretext to transfer him to the United States, where he feared prosecution over the release by WikiLeaks of millions of classified documents.
This case is and has always been about the risk of extradition to the United States. We've been saying since 2010 that that risk is real, and we now have a provisional extradition request from the United States. The focus of our energies will now be on fighting that extradition request, and that fight starts tomorrow. Thank you.
To the U.S. now, defying the Congress, Attorney General William Barr will not attend a U.S. House Judiciary Committee hearing on Thursday on his handling of the Mueller report, according to Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, accusing Barr of being afraid to give evidence. He said Barr has just informed us that he will not attend tomorrow's hearing. Nadler, a Democrat, told reporters on Capitol Hill on Wednesday after a contentious Senate hearing earlier in the day where Barr defended his handling of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia report. Committee Democrats have vowed to issue a subpoena in an effort to force Barr to give evidence. The Justice Department and Democrats on the committee had been at odds over whether the Attorney General could be questioned by staffers. In addition to lawmakers, Barr wanted to be questioned only by House members. Barr's decision not to appear could lead House Democrats to subpoena him, setting the stage for a potential legal battle with the Trump administration. On Wednesday, Barr defended his handling of the report before the Senate Judiciary Committee, where he was grilled by Democrats. Democrats have accused him of trying to protect President Trump.
And we had made clear that the results of the investigation were going to be made public. And the deputy and I felt that the evidence developed by the special counsel was not sufficient to establish that the president committed a crime, and therefore it would be irresponsible and unfair for the department to release a report without stating the department's conclusions, and thus leave it hanging as to whether the department considered there had been criminal conduct. So the Deputy Attorney General and I conducted a careful review of the report with our staffs and legal advisors. And while we disagreed with some of the legal theories and felt that many of the episodes discussed in the report would not constitute obstruction as a matter of law, we didn't rest our decision on that. We took each of the 10 episodes and we assessed them against the analytical framework that had been set forth by the special counsel, and we concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation was not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense, pending release of the full transcript. That's what we were trying to do, notify the people as to the bottom line conclusion. We were not trying to summarize the 410-page report.
Mr. Barr also defended President Trump with his view of the president. Barr told the Senate panel that the powers of the presidency are so vast that Trump could shut down any investigation into him if he believed he was falsely accused.
The report contained a substantial amount of material over which the president could have asserted executive privilege, but the president made the decision not to assert executive privilege and to make public as much of the report as we could, subject to the redactions that we thought required. Now, we first heard that the special counsel's decision not to decide the obstruction issue at the March 5th meeting when he came over to the department, and we were frankly surprised that they were not going to reach a decision on obstruction. And we asked them a lot about the reasoning behind this and the basis for this.
Now, Democrats also asked Barr about a letter sent by Mueller to him in which the special counsel complained that Barr's March 24 letter to lawmakers stating the inquiry's main conclusions did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office's work. Take a look.
You lied to Congress. You told Representative Charlie Crist that you didn't know what objections Mueller's team might have to your March 24th so-called summary. You told Senator Chris Van Hollen that you didn't know if Bob Mueller supported your conclusions. But you knew. You lied. And now we know.
Did anyone, either you or anyone on your staff, memorialize your conversation with Robert Mueller?
Yes.
Who did that?
There were notes taken of the call.
May we have those notes?
No.
Why not?
Why should you have them? And the job of the Justice Department is now over. That determines whether or not there's a crime. The report is now in the hands of the American people. Everyone can decide for themselves. There's an election in 18 months. That's a very democratic process. But we're out of it. And we have to stop using the criminal justice process as a political weapon.
Barr also said that in a phone call with Mueller after he received the letter, Mueller was very clear that he wasn't suggesting that he had misrepresented his report. Instead, Barr said Mueller told him he was upset that the press coverage was reading too much into the letter.
Step forward.
And I asked him if he was suggesting that the March 24th letter was inaccurate, and he said no, but that the press reporting had been inaccurate, and that the press was reading too much into it. And I asked him, specifically what his concern was. And he said that his concern focused on his explanation of why he did not reach a conclusion on obstruction. And he wanted more put out on that issue. U.S. border authorities plan to give migrant families DNA tests
to determine whether or not the adults and children are related, according to the Department of Homeland Security officials. A rapid DNA test program is being launched in several places along the U.S.-Mexico frontier, where tens of thousands of undocumented migrants have been crossing the border each month, many in family units asking for asylum. U.S. officials say some involve adults using unrelated children as a means of entering and remaining in the United States, and the new tests aim at preventing this. They plan to take cheek swabs of the migrants and process them to prove a parent-child relationship. Now, those whose claims are fraudulent will be prosecuted, according to officials. Child and migrant advocates have voiced concern that the DNA testing would unfairly impact those who travel with adopted children or relatives outside of their nuclear families. There have, however, been allegations of families accepting money to allow non-relatives to cross the border with their children as a way to evade detention, according to the Washington Post. President Donald Trump, whose campaign was largely centered on clamping down on illegal immigration, is making a renewed push for border security in the run-up to his 2020 re-election bid. To the UK now, British Prime Minister Theresa May sacked Defense Secretary Gavin Williamson over a leak of discussions in the National Security Council about Chinese telecoms company Huawei, the latest of her allies to be removed from the government. May said in a letter to Williamson that the investigation provides compelling evidence suggesting your responsibility for the unauthorized disclosure from the April 23 meeting of the National Security Council, although he strenuously denied responsibility. This is an extremely serious matter, she said, and deeply disappointing one, she added, with Williamson now facing the possibility of a criminal probe. Williamson responded in a letter to May saying, quote, "I strenuously deny that I was in any way involved in this leak, and I am confident that a thorough and formal inquiry would have vindicated my position." He revealed that May had given him the chance to resign, but turned it down as it would have been an acceptance of guilt. Secrecy was broken last month when the Telegraph newspaper reported Britain would allow Huawei a role in building parts of its 5G network, setting London at odds with Washington over the next generation of communications technology. The U.S. is adamantly opposed to Huawei's involvement because of the firm's obligation under Chinese law to help its home government gather intelligence or provide other security services when required. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denounced a rise in anti-Semitism around the world at a ceremony on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day, pointedly referring to Saturday's shooting in a California synagogue that killed one person and wounded 3 others, 2 of them Israelis. Take a look.
אנו חיים היום בפרדוקס. הערצה ברחבי העולם למדינת היהודים מלווה בחוגים מסוימים בהתגברות של שנאת היהודים. הימין הקיצוני, השמאל הקיצוני והאסלאם הקיצוני מסכימים רק על דבר אחד, על שנאת היהודים.
לא יכול היה להתממש אלא במלחמת עולם. מכשירי עזר לשמע המיועדים לכבדי שמיעה
צעקנו את הילדים לעבר הגדר, פתאום מרגלית הקטנה איננה.
איננו בשנות ה-30, איננו עומדים על סיפה של שואה שנייה חלילה, או כל דבר שאפילו מתקרב לזה. אבל אי אפשר להתעלם מהאנטישמיות החדשה-ישנה ששבה להרים ראש.
את דבר השורדים, ניצולי השואה.
Nearly 800,000 people in eastern India have been evacuated from the path of an incoming major cyclone, packing winds gusting up to 200 kilometers per hour and torrential rains. The Indian Weather Service said extremely severe cyclonic storm Fani was expected to make landfall on Friday afternoon in Odisha state and barrel northeastwards towards Bangladesh on a pathway that is home to more than 100 million people. Along with extremely heavy rainfall in places, a storm surge of about 5 feet is very likely to inundate some low-lying areas of Odisha, according to the Indian Meteorological Department. A state relief department official said that 780,000 people were moved to safer places overnight. On Thursday, the storm, which reports said was the biggest to hit eastern India in nearly 2 decades, was brewing in the Bay of Bengal and moving steadily and ominously towards the shore. It was predicted to pack sustained wind speeds of up to 180 to 190 kilometers per hour and up to 200 kilometers per hour, winds equivalent strength to a Category 3 to 4 hurricane. It was expected to make landfall near the Hindu town, which they consider holy, called the Puri, a major tourist hotspot. More than 100 trains have been cancelled in the past 48 hours, according to Indian Railways. 3 special trains were running from Puri to evacuate pilgrims and tourists. Authorities have also asked tourists to leave the coastal areas and avoid unnecessary travel. Meanwhile, here's the Indian Weather Service saying the extremely severe cyclonic storm Fani is expected to make landfall on Friday afternoon in Odisha state and barrel northeastwards on a pathway close to the homes of more than 100 million people. Let's listen in.
As per the latest information from IMD, the cyclone is likely to hit on 3rd late evening somewhere in Puri. And likely they have said that there will be heavy rainfall on 3rd and mostly the coastal and the adjoining district will be affected. And we will ensure that all the people who are vulnerable, who will be identified as vulnerable, they will be shifted to our cyclone centers. As you know, Odisha has built up a lot of infrastructure to take care of cyclone. We are using GIS maps to map out which are the likely population or the habitation to be hit by the cyclone, and we will map out the affected population and we will make necessary arrangements for the evacuation, the stay, accommodation in our cyclone centers.
Meanwhile, Bolivian rescue teams and residents of a hillside neighborhood in La Paz attempt to recover what is left of their homes after a landslide struck, triggered by heavy rains and runoffs. And take a look. A landslide in Bolivia has reduced most of this neighborhood into rubble. Rescue teams are now trying to recover what's left. Authorities say dozens of homes were destroyed. 2 landslides in Bolivia left 14 people dead and 7 missing. Torrential rain caused the landslides on the road linking to capital La Paz to the northern town of Caranavi, the gateway to the Amazon rainforest.
Mi casa se ha desaparecido en totalidad. Yo vivo con mis 4 hijos. Tengo 2 hijos enfermos. No sé dónde ir ahorita, no tengo dónde llevar mis cosas. Se han perdido la mitad de mi hija, totalidad su casa.
In other news, Thailand's King Maha Vajiralongkorn will be crowned this weekend in a pageantry-laden ceremony flecked by rituals as Rama X furthers his primacy over one of the world's richest monarchies and a kingdom beset by ulcerous political divides. The May 4 to 6 coronation comes more than 2 years after Vajiralongkorn ascended the throne at the death of his father, Bhumibol Adulyadej. Bhumibol reigned over 7 tumultuous decades and was revered by Thais as a symbol of unity in a politically chaotic country. His fiercely private 66-year-old son, Rama X of the Chakri dynasty, is less well known by his subjects and makes frequent trips overseas. On Saturday, at the auspicious hour of 10:09 a.m., the public will be given a rare window into the heart of Thai power as blanket television coverage of the three-day coronation begins. In an unexpected twist late Wednesday, the palace named his consort and deputy head of his security, Sutida Vajiralongkorn Ayuja, as his fourth wife, making her Queen Sutida. It has added to the mounting intrigue around the royal ceremony. Welcome back. Malacanang hailed President Duterte's economic team for the upgrade by the Standard & Poor or S&P of Philippines investment grade credit rating to BBB+, the highest credit rating in the country's economic history, conferred by the respected economic think tank. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo said, quote, in a statement, the economic team of the president has done a splendid job in putting the economic house in order and spearheading bold economic reforms in cooperation with Congress in bolstering the domestic economy, which is projected to become the world's top 25 economy. Among these economic reforms are tax reform, liberalization of the rice sector, strengthening of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Charter, ease of doing business, relaxing the foreign investment negative list, and modernizing infrastructure, among others. Panelo, meanwhile, emphasized that the president recognizes the importance of a thriving economy to help make Filipinos' lives more comfortable by providing them with more jobs. S&P upgraded the Philippines investment grade credit rating to BBB+, attributing the country's strong economic growth trajectory. OPEC is determined to avoid a global energy crisis as some of its members are facing international sanctions and others struggling with unrest, the cartel Secretary General said in Tehran on Thursday. He said, as an organization, we will remain focused on our goal of avoiding an energy crisis that may affect the global economy, Mohamed Barkindo said on the sidelines of an oil and gas exhibition. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, will pursue this policy despite current troubles in several of its member countries, he said. His comments came as the end of U.S. sanction waivers for purchases of oil from key OPEC member Iran was due to kick in on Thursday. Venezuela, another cartel member, is also facing sweeping U.S. sanctions and in the throes of political troubles while fighting rages between rival forces for control Tripoli, capital of oil-rich Libya. Barkindo didn't name any country but said some OPEC producers were currently under unilateral sanctions, a reference to Iran and Venezuela. And Kuwait inaugurated one of the world's longest causeways linking the oil-rich Gulf state's capital to an uninhabited border region set to become a major free trade hub.
We are celebrating today for the opening ceremony of Sheikh Jabal Ahmed al-Sabah causeway, which is considered one of the longest causeways in the world. This is about 48 kilometers. It contains Sabbiya link, or the main link, which is 36 kilometers, plus Doha link, which is 12 kilometers. We are so proud to finish this project here, the first time this kind of project here in Kuwait, within the time and the cost required.
The 36-kilometer bridge connects Kuwait City to the northern desert area of Subiya, where Kuwait aims to create the Silk City project, linking the Gulf to Central Asia and Europe. The Jabir Bridge, named after late ruler Sheikh Jaber al-Ahmad al-Sabah, spans 36 kilometers, three-quarters of it over water. It cuts the driving time between Kuwait City and Subiya, close to both Iran and Iraq, from 90 minutes to less than half an hour. Investment in the Silk City project is expected to top $100 billion, and a 5,000-megawatt power plant has already been built in Subiya. The $3.6 billion causeway, designed by Paris-based engineering and consulting group Sistra, took 5 years to build. Welcome back. Up to 1 million species face extinction due to human influence, according to a draft UN report obtained by AFP that painstakingly catalogs how humanity has undermined the natural resources upon which its very survival depends. Take a look. To Canada now, where Church of Christ members in Ottawa participated in a GLAAD cleaning up the Capitol drive. Here's Sabir Mufti for the report.
How do you clean up the environment? With current environmental issues like climate change, waste disposal, air pollution, and water contamination affects people living in this world.
The members of the Church of Christ participates in this city's campaign of GLAAD cleaning up the Capitol. GLAAD cleaning up the Capitol campaign is one of the city's initiatives. It occurs in the spring and fall of each year. Residents of different communities come together to make the city clean and green.
Clean up the community so that way we can help make the community look nice. So that way people can all the more appreciate what we do here inside the Church of Christ.
The members of the Church of Christ clean the McFarland Road, picking up litters, debris, cigarette butts, plastics, and waste.
Reporting from Ottawa, Canada, for Eagle News, I'm Sabir Mufti, 1 with 25.
Thank you, Sabir. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on Eagle News International, I'm Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25. Good night.